Today I'm going to be reviewing the Porsche Taycan 4S, which has 520 horsepower and does 0 to 60 and guess what? 3.6 seconds. The MSRP on this is going to be around $105,000 starting out before options and upgrades. And now let me tell you what, there's about 90 or so options and upgrades that you can choose from, and Porsche is going to make you pay for every single last one of them. Get back to that in a second. As you move up the hierarchy, you're gonna have the 4S with the upgraded battery, and that's gonna get you a little bit more range, and it's also gonna get you a little bit more power. So you're gonna have around 560 horsepower there. Then you're gonna have the turbo that's gonna get you up above 600 horsepower. And lastly, you have the Turbo S that's gonna get you up above 700 horsepower. But guess what? The price tag attached to that is gonna be $185,000. Now, if you got it, you got it, and God bless you if you do. Anyway, going back to the options and upgrades, so there's close to 90 options and upgrades that you can do, whether it's the automatic opening charge port or whether it's the additional screen on the passenger side. So there's so many different options that you can choose from, different wheel options, color options, etc., etc., etc. The list goes on and on. And while this may seem a little daunting, if you're going to be a buyer for the Taycan, what you might want to do is you want to do your research and you want to really check in with the folks at the dealership and really understand what you want and what you need in your vehicle before you actually push that submit button when you go build your new Taycan. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the exterior features, the interior features, and then we're going to take it for a spin. But let's go ahead and start with the exterior. Follow me around front. As far as the exterior design go, it has the traditional 4-dot LED headlights that you typically see with most new Porsche models. It also has the automatic high beam, so those come in real handy for those country roads that you may be driving on and things like that. So automatic high, and it turns back off when it senses another car coming your way. Pretty dope feature, really love that. The car is lowered, it has a very sleek look and a sleek design to it that really gives it that feel of luxury, but also that sporty feel. Another thing, as you look down below, there are some sensors, some front parking sensors that are there, and then there's a bulb looking thing, and that's an actual front parking camera that's going to be there for if you're pulling into parking spots. Since this car sits so low, you may run the risk of bumping the curb or anything like that, but you don't have to worry about that, because once those front parking sensors senses an object close by, being a parking blockade or anything like that, it's going to cut that camera on and you'll be able to see what you're doing and be able to park. There's also two other cameras that are on the side view mirrors that you can leverage just to get a sense of what your environment looks like, especially when you're pulling in and out of tight spots. So I think that's really dope that this car has a 360 field of view that you can leverage. Next up, you have the 19-inch rims. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but they look really good depending on how you option those out. So your choice on that, dealer's choice. And the next thing is the door handle. So the door handles are relatively flat when you look at them as you're passing by this vehicle, but there are two ways that you can actually get them to pop out and present themselves to you. One being that you can kind of press underneath or feel underneath the door handle, and as you have the key fob on your person, those handles will pop out and present themselves to you and it'll allow you to actually enter the vehicle. The second way you can get into the vehicle is if you actually use the key fob and you press the unlock button, and you'll start to see all four handles present themselves to you, and then you can essentially just leverage that and pop into the vehicle. Let's take it around back. All right, so here at the rear, you can see the design concept just still continues back here. So it still has that traditional long light bar that you'll see on most Porsche vehicles. So I think that's really good that they kept that design. Also back in here, you see the Porsche kind of written all the way across, and it looks like it's kind of interwoven with some, you know, circuit board type of material going on back there. So it looks pretty dope, looks pretty futuristic. Now, if you're wondering, if you're looking at this back window, how's the visibility? It's actually pretty good. I would say once you're inside, it looks bad from the outside, like, hey, I probably won't be able to see anything with the headrest and the 3 headrests and all those different things, but no, visibility is actually pretty good once you're actually sitting inside. And then you also have the camera, so no worries there. Now, if you're wondering how do you actually get inside the trunk, I'll show you that here in a second. But before we get into the trunk, I want to show you something really cool. So the rear backup camera actually has a little washer on it, so you can actually clean it from the inside with the touch of a button. So I think that's pretty cool. I've reviewed a few cars that have that now, and I always enjoy that feature, especially when you live in those states where you have different climates and weather, and that can really get dirty. So I really appreciate that feature. I think it's very thoughtful. And then now to get into the trunk, what you have to do is you can either use the key fob, which is the natural way to do things, or you can press this little button right here and the trunk opens. Now, if you want to close the trunk, you can't press that button again. See, nothing happens. What you'll have to do is you'll actually have to press this button up here, and then that will close the trunk. So I just press that, that closes the trunk. Now, if you're wondering about trunk space in the Taycan, I can tell you that it's not crazy, it's not super roomy, but it's not limiting either. And what I mean by that is, let's say that you're traveling, you can fit 2 pretty large, or I would say mid-sized suitcases or luggage back there if you turn them sideways. So that's not going to be limiting, especially if you got 2 people traveling somewhere. You can put some suitcases back there, so no issues there. Now, if you got a bunch of people traveling, I don't know about all that. So you're gonna have to figure that out. Another couple things I just want to point out before we head inside. So this vehicle has air suspension, so you can raise and lower this vehicle with a setting in the actual car. I'll show you that later once we get into the interior and start talking about that, as well as there are 2 charging ports on this vehicle, which I think is pretty cool. On one side you have AC charging, and then the other side you have AC and DC charging. So I think that's pretty dope, that if you go charge somewhere, you can kind of pull up any way and then get to it with your vehicle and get it charged up. Now, I will say that's a better option than most vehicles because you have to charge them one way. Now, it's not limiting, but I think it's just great to have the 2 options. Let's head inside. Whoa! All right, so things to take in, there's so many things to talk about. But before we get into all the stuff that I can potentially talk about, what I want to touch on real quick, so you saw me just drop in here, right? So depending on how tall you are, I'm 5'9", these seats are very low, and they can get very low depending on how you set them, but they're like really buckety, so like it's hard to get out. Like, I mean, like I gotta like try to actually get out the car. So I don't know if you saw, but I put like the back of my tricep right here just to like try to help myself get out. Otherwise, you're gonna have to be rocking in and out this joint. But it's not too much of a deal breaker for me. I've sat in low cars or low seats before, and bucket seats, so no worries there. Now, I will say from left to right, if I'm looking at this vehicle, a couple things that I'm going to point out. So there's a power button that's here, and that's there to kind of turn the car on and off as if to be its starter in a sense. Now, I know Tesla, you can just kind of hop in, hop out, and the car knows you're there and it turns on and turns off. This is kind of a similar thing. Once you have that button to press to turn the car on initially, you don't have to keep pressing it back and forth to turn it back off or anything like that. So I think that's pretty cool. And then to the right of this very nice steering wheel, might I add, but it's pretty standard to like what you'll see in most Porsches anyway, has your standard audio controls here on the left. It has your cruise control and all of those settings, and that is going to be right here on this little lever here. And then to the right of that on the steering wheel, you're going to have your various drive mode settings, and I'll get back to that later. But if we move all the way to the right, there is a parking lever that's sitting there, or a gear lever, I would say, and there you're going to find your reverse, neutral, and drive settings. And to the right of that is going to be a park button. So I think that's a pretty interesting design. It's just, you know, a little flick of the wrist, when you turn it, when you trying to put it in drive and put it in reverse and neutral and stuff like that. The next thing that I'm going to talk about and spend some real good time on is going to be the screen. So there are multiple screens in here. So there's the digital dash, there's also going to be the infotainment screen, and then there's also a screen that's right below that. Now this bottom screen has a bunch of different features that I mentioned before. So again, you can control your nav from here, you can control some of your music settings from here as well. Phone settings, there's going to be some car settings that you can control, such as drive mode, chassis height, which that's what I mentioned earlier with the air suspension on this vehicle. You can change the chassis height, so you can literally raise and lower this vehicle as needed with the press of a button, which I think is pretty cool. And again, this is going to come in handy, especially if you're driving in places or coming out of driveways, so you don't scrape the front end and things like that. So it's good that you have that variability, that you can adjust the height of this vehicle. And down below those settings, you have your climate control settings or your climate menu, so you can set things like your AC or your recirc or just, you know, the frosters and all those different things. You also have your heated and cooled seat settings here as well, your fan speed, as well as just the general climate of the vehicle that you can set from this area. Down to the right, you have two icons. So one is a car icon that has the front trunk and the rear trunk popped open, and if you press that, you can see various vehicle settings here that allow you to kind of remotely open a lot of things in this vehicle. So I can open the trunk from here, I can open the front from this menu as well, and then I can also open the AC charge port on the left hand side of this vehicle and the AC DC charge port on the right hand side of this vehicle. Now if I just hit the X and back out of this menu, there's also another icon that's right below that that looks like a battery. Now if you press that battery icon, you can now see your charge percentage as well as your range. So right now I have around 186 miles of range in this vehicle that I can take advantage of. So below that, there's a bunch of space that's here, and you're probably like, what is this space? Why is this here? Now it's kind of crazy because you can literally control with the touch of a finger the infotainment screen with this touchpad that's here. So you can literally move settings, X out of things, you know, change various navigate screens, change various drive mode settings, etc. with this trackpad that you have on the screen. I don't think it's really necessary because you have the infotainment screen that's right here, and that's also touchscreen. So like if you're driving, you can very easily just go ahead and touch that. You don't really need that. I guess the passenger can use it, I don't know, but I don't think it adds or takes away from the vehicle. I don't know what else they could have put there, so I don't necessarily have a critique for that. I just think it's interesting. But below this, you have your cup holder. So there's one cup holder located right here, right below that screen, and then there's another cup holder located to the rear of that. So both parties kind of have a cup holder that they can use. If I move up to the vents, you can't move them, right? I can touch on all of these vents that are around this vehicle, but I have to go into a separate menu within the car to actually change the climate setting. So when you go into that menu, you have diffused, which I think just really just kind of blows air through the car, and then you have focused, which I think just focuses the air on the occupants of the vehicle, so the driver and the passenger, etc. And then you have individual, and once you press individual, they're like 4 different circles or balls, if you want to call them that, on the screen that you can use, and you can kind of angle the air or move the air in the direction that you want it to go. Now I'm kind of used to this because I have something similar in the car that I drive, so it's not really a weird thing to me, but I just think it's just an overall interesting setup because there's like 4 of them that you kind of have to move around and angle around, and I don't know that I want to be fidgeting with that while I'm driving. So I think from a safety standpoint, there's got to be something a little bit better that you can do in the event that you do want to change these options while you're driving and kind of force the air to be somewhere else. But that's just my critique. That's my opinion. I think they could have did that a little bit better. Maybe in future models they'll think about that a little bit more and figure that out. This car comes with Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. It's wireless. You can take advantage of that. I did mention that this is a touchscreen. It's fairly responsive, you know, very responsive to the touch actually. So no worries there with using the screen and worrying about the functionality on there. Now below that, you have a couple other settings. You have the parking camera, which if you press that, you can see a 360 field of view. So it opens up this menu here on the infotainment screen where you can see on the left side an aerial view of your vehicle, and on the right hand side you can see the front view. So the front of the car, I can see that there's like a bush in front of me right now because that's what the sensor is picking up, and it doesn't want me to hit that. So naturally it's going to go to that camera versus the rear camera first to say, hey, you have an obstacle in your path. So I think that's pretty cool. When you're in this menu in the infotainment screen, there's a couple options there. So there's an option right below the camera icon where you can kind of press that, and it kind of takes you into more of a different type of view. It kind of warps the camera. I don't really know what this is doing. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like a psychedelic type of vibe going on when you press that button. I'll show it to you in the B-roll though. You'll see that. And then there's another view that brings up 3 separate screens. So it's like a 3x3. So you have on the left side, you have the aerial view of the car. So that one pretty much stays consistent. And then there's an icon there again that tells you that, hey, the front camera out of the 2 cameras that are here is activated right now because I have something in front of me. But then you also get the side view. So you get the view from the side view cameras. So if you were parking in a tight spot or something like that, or parking close to a curb, you'd be able to pick that up as to not scrape your 19-inch rims on this $105,000 vehicle, because I'm pretty sure you'd be mad if you did that. And we don't want you to be mad. Porsche don't want you to be mad. Porsche don't want you to scratch nothing. So that's why they gave you those. To the right of the parking icon, as I move down on this bottom screen here, there's a plus and a minus button. And that plus and minus button is there because it is a volume control that you can use. Now, I will say overall on the screen, I don't know that that's like the best place for that. But again, the passenger is not going to have anything to turn up or down the volume in the vehicle, and it's not really good because you have to really press this thing, right? So you can't like press it and hold it and there's like the volume's just gonna go up like crazy. You have to like tap. You have to tap everything. You have to tap that. You have to tap the climate control. If you want to raise or lower the heat in the car, you have to literally tap everything intentionally if you're going to do anything. So there's a lot of tapping going on in here. So I don't know if that's the best design for the driver or for the passenger, but I will say this. You have the audio control here on the left-hand side of your steering wheel as a driver, so you can definitely leverage that. No issues there. From a passenger standpoint, here's my message to you. Don't touch my radio. Got it? Cool. Moving on up to the infotainment screen. So you have some drive settings, and some of those drive settings essentially coincide with the drive settings here on the steering wheel with this little knob. So you have normal, you have sport, you have sport plus, you know, you have individual, and you can kind of configure individual to your liking and, you know, kind of make that your own and whatever that is. But I will say the one thing that I really enjoy about sport and sport plus is that it basically creates this electric sport sound. So it sounds like you're driving in a Porsche that has like an engine. So I think that's really dope. People can hear you coming. It's something that you hear inside the vehicle as well, or inside the cabin as you're driving. So it makes you feel like you're getting all fast and furious with it. In the drive mode settings, there's one other thing I want to point out. So there's recuperation, and recuperation, it's on this vehicle right now, and basically you can get to that through the infotainment screen, and you can basically turn it on, you can turn it off, you can have it set to auto, but that essentially helps with your regen. So if you want to preserve as much battery as possible while you're driving, then you're going to want to probably have that on, or even just set it to auto so the car knows when to turn it on and turn it off. But I will say that if you have it off, it's going to feel more of like you're driving a normal car, like, you know, a non-electric car. And then you have this nice digital dash here, so you can see your various vehicle settings. Right now this one is saying inflate tire. I'm in a cold weather climate right now, so you know how that goes. I mean, you kind of lose a little bit of, you know, air in the tire just because it's cold outside, or at least the car thinks that. But so you have those settings. With that, you also have your map there. You have your it tells you how many degrees it is outside, just, you know, various vehicle settings that you have here. And it has this nice curvy look to it. I think this is pretty sleek and a pretty nice design. It kind of reminds me of one of the screens, or like that center screen that you'll see in like a Lucid or something like that. But I think it's pretty cool. And it also shows you your range and your miles per hour. So just the standard cockpitish, dashboardy type stuff that you would find in any other vehicle, you're gonna see that here. So not a lot of craziness there to talk about, but I think it just looks good and it complements the overall design of the vehicle. Roof wise, you kind of have this long sunroof, doesn't open, which is fine. No electric cars I don't think have, well, I think some of them do, but anyway, I think this is pretty good, man. The seats are comfortable. As I mentioned before, they're kind of buckety, so kind of hard to get in and out of, but there's going to be plenty of room in here for 4 people, and there's also room in the back. So I think all around, just on the interior of this vehicle, is pretty well rounded and it looks really nice. I've noticed even driving this car like around town that I've been getting a lot of looks. People are just like, what is that? What is that? That's dope. And they're also like, what you doing driving that? You know that look. Y'all know that look. But anyway, we won't talk about that. One other thing I just want to go back to is, so if I press the icon button here for the front, I didn't show y'all the front yet. I'm gonna pop that. Now, before I can actually open this front, there's something I gotta do. I gotta fiddle under here. I gotta find this little lever. I gotta pull it. And now I can really release it for the front to be open. Do I like this feature? Not really. If it's open, I want it to be open and just grab it. Like if I have groceries in my hand and stuff like that, I don't necessarily want to set them down all the time. I should just be able to just grab it, open it. But I can understand where this could be a safety concern, that if you were to pop this by accident and be driving, it could probably like fly up and mash the windshield, and we definitely don't want that. So I ain't gonna knock it. But the front, it ain't that big, but it's deep. It's real deep. Like I can fit my whole arm all the way up until like my bicep in here. So I think that, you know, you can leverage the space for whatever you want, but I think just a quick grocery run and stuff like that, the front trunk, definitely it. I already knew the next thing I was gonna say was, but what about the back, D'Angelo? Why don't you sit back there? So I'm sitting back here right now. As you can see, again, if you're watching my videos for the first time, I'm 5'9", and there's not a crazy amount of room back here, which is fine. I mean, it's as to be expected, right? It's like a super sporty luxury vehicle, and I don't think you're gonna really have people riding back here too much. Maybe like some smaller adults or children or something like that. Other than that, tall folks, stay away. Do not sit back here. This is not your space. This is not your domain. I don't know how many other ways I can say it, but don't sit back here unless you got somebody really, really tiny sitting in front of you and they got the seat moved all the way up. Anyway, a couple things to note back there. Here you still have like the bucket seats, and then, you know, you have some climate control vents back here that you can kind of set. There's no climate control settings back here for the passengers, so unfortunately you're at the liberty of whoever's sitting up front, the climate they have set. But you can kind of turn on and turn off the vents, I guess, if you want to do that. But other than that, you got some heated seat options back here for the folks that are sitting back here. And lastly, you can only fit 2 people back here, so don't try to fit 3 people back here. I guess from a shoulder standpoint, you could fit 3 people back here, but like I probably wouldn't advise it. Maybe 3 smaller people. All right, so right now I'm in the Taycan driving, and I will say that oh my goodness, the handling is superb, and the interior of this definitely doesn't give you that soulless electric vehicle type of situation that you're gonna find in most other electric vehicles. This is luxury. This is elegance. it's sleek. It's real nice in here. Like, I feel like I'm driving a luxury car, and I don't have to worry about the guilt of premium gas. Like, this is amazing. So, you know, the fat tires on this, the wide tires on this really has it handling very well, gripping tight corners, and woo, the acceleration is phenomenal. Oh my goodness. So it has that initial kick where you kind of feel it sinking into, you kind of get that sinking feeling like you're on a roller coaster, but it kind of levels out as you continue to go. And I think that feels pretty good. You know, this is very much so a Porsche, right? It's very poised, it's very balanced. The steering, the handling, everything is like an extension of my arm. It's like the car moves with me. And I don't know if you can hear that, but I have it in Sport Plus right now, so it's making all the sport noises. I'm gonna do a quick launch real quick and see what that looks like. Oh shit. Oh my goodness. I can definitely see why people love this vehicle and would want to have it in their arsenal. Like, no complaints there. I definitely see why people own this vehicle. I will say that, you know, I enjoy driving this so far, and I think that this is something you should definitely take a look at if you have this or electric vehicles on your radar and this is within your price range. I think it's definitely worth considering. Other than that, I don't really have any bad critiques about this.